Okay, so let's rather than going into theory or technique or whatever, let's actually take a look at modeling something practical. We'll see how Inkscape can create some realistic looking objects. It's of course, like all vector graphics, not great for things like skin or hair or anything like that, but as far as artificial materials go and some natural other materials, it actually works pretty well. I just tracked down a picture of an iPhone, and I figured that would be sort of a good little practice material. So I imported it into Inkscape, just copied and pasted it, and so now start with the rectangle tool, so R for rectangle, and now we've got to get it to have some curved edges like we see with the iPhone. So we'll just tap in something. I did rounded edges of about 35 by 35. I guess that's okay. You can directly trace if you want. You can just drag the rectangle across the object that you're copying, but I'd really encourage you to not try and make things perfect. Things look better when they're not completely perfect. But anyways, we've got the basic shape. I could probably expand that a bit more. I've selected my rectangle, and if I hit R, it allows me to change these dimensions again. But that's pretty close. Not perfect, but it's close. So got this outer edge here. You can see sort of it's got a darker right around the edge, gets lighter in between, has a lighter shadow there. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is just sort of get that darker edge first, turn down the blue saturation, but now I'm going to duplicate it. So I select it and I hit Control D, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift as I bring the edge in a bit, and then hold down Shift as I bring in the top piece a bit, and that keeps it even on all sides. So now I'm just going to lighten it a bit, because I want to get this dynamic. So you see the darker edge, lighter in the middle. I want to get that over here as well. And for now, I think that's fine. I'm going to get that white interior, but I'm not going to actually make mine completely white. I think that, and if you've seen some of my other tutorials, it just looks better when something's not completely uniform. So we'll do a gradient, have it going across. I'm going to change color slightly. Still looks pretty white, but not as white as the reference material here. And we kind of see here, so we've got our darker exterior, lighter gray middle. Select that, make it maybe a little bit more obvious there. And of course, there's a beauty of Inkscape. We can just play with this as we go. So now I guess we'll just drag out that interior there, and this will be without without any rounded edges. So we'll enter in 0 values for that, and if we use the color picker, we can just F7, and then you click on the color you want, and it tells us that the saturation and the lightness are all 0. But I don't want to use just a solid black color. We'll go a little bit lighter and have just a touch of color in there. Up to you if you want to go sort of that solid black, but solid white, solid black I tend to try and avoid. So hit Control Shift A, and that brings up our alignment options. So align and distribute. So just what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select all my objects. I'm going to have them align on their vertical axis. So I hit that, and it sort of perfectly centers that black screen. Now it needs to be a bit wider, as we can see from this, so click on it, hold down Shift, and then widen it a bit. It seems as if it's a perfectly crisp frame, but I don't think that looks very realistic, so what I'm going to do is just add on a very slight blur to this. So we'll go just a 0.5, so typing that in manually. 0.5 blur, and I don't know, I just like that a little bit better. So so we've got a few little objects here to try and recreate. So there's this shape here. I'm going to create a rectangle, and then I'm going to turn on its rounding for the x and the y coordinates. So I don't know, that's too much. In the end, I'm not going to really obsess over it too much. Doesn't have to be perfect, just something like that. So let's lighten it up a bit. So I've added a gradient, and that's something along the lines of what might work. So select it, hit Control D for duplicate, make it a solid fill, and then bring it in. So resize it. And it's probably, again, it's too rounded. So if you have a rectangle shape selected and you hit R, it brings back those rounding options. So we're gonna drop down the rounding a fair bit. And that's a little bit better. There's not necessarily a gradient going through this, but I tend to see, I mean, even if there isn't a gradient there, it's always good for the sake of visual interest, just to alternate things a bit. So I've added a couple of gradient points. So change it to a gradient, hit G, and then you double click that line that comes up and you add in new gradient points. So I'm just going to lighten those a bit. Maybe that was a bit too much. Let's try that again. And there we go, just so it's not completely uniform. So select it, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm okay with that. Not perfect, but again, things are better when they're not perfect. A little bit bigger just to fit this one here. And again, call up the alignment options again, so Control Shift A calls up alignment, and it's fine just to select it all and to align to that middle axis, and then we'll sort of look across here. Needs to be brought up a bit, so we'll bring it up. Okay, so now a couple of circles to create. Create one, so hit E for ellipse. If you really want to mirror something, you hit F7, choose the color picker, and you're going to see that this ellipse becomes exactly like that color there. Generally speaking, though, I'd advise against it. You know, just go with what looks good. But anyway, so there's the middle circle for that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add on an ellipse to this. Sorry, not an ellipse. I'm going to add on a gradient. It's already an ellipse. So there we go. And just so it's not uniform, you know, it gets a little bit different as it goes across. It's fine. And then, so got this one to create as well. So drag out another ellipse. This time the middle part is a little bit darker. So duplicate and drag it in, Make it darker. And again, put on a gradient. Make it really subtle. And there we go. So we'll drag these over. This one needs to be centered along the top. Control-Shift-A. Get that option. And then this is just sort of in line with, I don't have a cell phone, so I don't know what the hell any of these parts are. Anyways, just about done. We've got these buttons on the side, and then we've got this button at the bottom. So we'll do these side buttons first. I'm going to drag out a rectangle. It's curved right along the side there, so let's bump up the rounding on that. I don't think we're going to get it perfect, but we'll get it good enough. So what I did is, I want this basically cut in half, so I drew another shape that I'm going to use to bisect the original shape. Hold down Shift, click on the other shape so they're both selected at the same time, and now do Control-. And it gives, what the hell? Okay. Not sure what happened there. Gives roughly the shape that we want here. Again, got a gradient going across, so gets lighter in the middle, a little bit darker at the end, so put on a gradient for this. Darker at the top. Drag the opacity back so it's lighter there. Lighten these up. And then the middle parts even lighter. We'll mess around with that more, but I'm good with that as is. So I'm going to drag that across. Now we're going to hit the N key on the keyboard to drop it to the back. You can see that these buttons sort of line up with each other. So select it, hit Control D to duplicate, bring it over, flip it, and then hit End. Drop it to the back again. So we've got those two there. This one here is roughly the same size. This one's much smaller, lines up at the top edge. So with those in mind, those facts in mind, I'll just duplicate it, bring it over a little bit further down, duplicate it, bring it up. It's got a line with that top edge there, but it's also smaller, so we'll bring it in, hit End. There we go. What's becoming apparent is the edge on this original is much more subtle than the edge I've got here. So I'm going to select it, bring it up a bit, not as much contrast, make it a little bit more subtle. We've got this here. This is kind of interesting because if we zoom in, we can see that there's this shadow around the edge of it. So I'm going to create this. We'll drag out an ellipse that's roughly the same size. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stroke around it. And I'm going to have it be that gray or something approaching that. And then the fill is going to be much lighter. But again, I'm going to have it deviate a little bit as it goes across. And probably the stroke needs to be a little bit heavier, so we'll go 4, too much. 3, still too much. I don't know, 2.7. Yeah, perfect, awesome. Okay, and then we need that that shadow going around it. So just drag this over. Apparently my screen's too big. Let's drag that up a bit. Okay. And we'll select both the screen and the button at the same time. Control-Shift-A to get the alignment options. We'll have them aligned down the center. So button's right in the middle now. And we need sort of a shadowy ring going around this. So we'll hit Control-D to duplicate. Make it all black. Turn off the stroke. Make it so it's just a little bit bigger than the button itself. And now we'll blur it a little bit. And we'll hit page down. That's probably a stronger shadow than I want. If we look over here, much more subtle. So let's go back to this. Reduce the opacity a bit. There we go. So I think that's good. What am I missing here? Probably nothing. Well, no, actually probably something. Anyways, so no, that's how I would reconstruct this iPhone inside of Inkscape. Again, you know, even if you don't see color in the source object that you're working from, I mean, go ahead and add it in. It's, as I've said a couple of times, things look better when they're not perfect. One more thing is you've got this this kind of highlight that's happening in the four corners. In this case, I would just I just draw a curved shape, little fingernail sliver, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Just draw that. You're going to see from one of my earlier tutorials, I go over this using the Bezier tool. You can just draw what you want. Use the Control- trick to highlight any sections of it that you don't want. Whoops, turn off stroke. And there we go. We've got sort of our little sliver there. Blurring it would be, yeah, that'll add something. Maybe that's too much. Yeah, it's much bolder than the reference material, but no, maybe it'll work. So grab it, hit Control-D, drag it over, flip it, and we've got that corner as well now. Hold down Shift, select the original. You've got two of them now, so Control-D, drag them down. Whoops. Try that again. That's not working. Okay. There we go. Got them. Ah, fuck off. Okay. One more time. There. There we go. And so now we flip them upside down. And we drag them into place there. And I don't know, looking at that, I think those highlights probably are too vibrant. So I selected them all. I'm just gonna knock down their opacity a bit. And okay, relatively happy with that. See if there's anything else we can do. I don't know. I've got my screen set to a high contrast, so admittedly I'm not seeing what a lot of monitors are seeing, but relatively okay with this. Okay, and there we go. So think I'm just about done with that. Grab it and select it, hit Control G, turn it into a group, and we've got our phone here. Put a shadow behind it. And there's our iPhone army. Okay, so just some ideas in that. Hope you found that useful. Again, as far as skin or hair goes, vector art isn't the best, but if you're just working with plastics, metals, glass, all that kind of stuff, vectors can typically recreate it to a pretty realistic degree. I'm just going to do one more thing here. It wasn't with the original picture, but I think it adds a little bit to add something of a glare or a shine to the lens itself. So I just use the Bezier tool to draw out my lens shape and maybe make it a bit more subtle. And so there we go. There's our iPhone. Okay, so thanks for watching. I'm starting to be a little bit more prolific with these, so if you want to hit subscribe, go ahead. I'll be back with more of these soon. Okay, thanks for watching.